Ladies and gentlemen, welcome again. It's Chats with Tess, President of Site Africa. And I'm very happy to be joined by Mr. Michael Jackson today, who's been a very good friend of Site and Business Travel. So I'd like to go straight across to Michael to let us hear from you and what you do, Michael.
Thank you. I'm a change speaker around the world, normally on the subject of business change and trends, Tess, showing people the way that the world is changing and what's unfolding before them. And I've been known for saying that change will come faster in your life than at any other time that any other generation has ever seen. And boy, have we been proved right. You know, I've been privileged to work at around 2,700 odd conferences right around the world. And seen and spoken to all sorts of people, from heads of state down to blue-collar workers on factory floors, really, I guess. And I'm just intrigued by change, and it's a pleasure to come and talk to you and see you again, albeit virtually, and to share a virtual cup of coffee with you. Nice to be with you, Tess.
Thank you so much, Michael. So, as Michael mentioned, his favorite topic in the world is change. And I think all of us are experiencing that more now than ever. Prior to we started the recording, we were just sharing some samples of things across industry. People either being laid off, being put on forced leave, etc., etc. Some of us are used to working at home and, you know, being semi-isolated. Many of us are not. Michael, what do we do? How do we help them cope?
The strange thing is that we see change as loss as human beings. It's something that we're actually terrified of. A well-known psychologist from the previous generation, Kubler-Ross, came up with the grief curve for change, which is absolutely the model that people need to understand whenever any form of change is announced. You know, at one side, change gets announced over here, and you want the end result of whatever you're changing for to be better and therefore higher up. They taught you at kindergarten the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, but we don't take that straight line from change to the intended goal. We take this huge curve, and it's a responsive human emotion. We go through all the negativity that we possibly can, that our brains can come up with. And the reason for that, it's actually a survival mechanism to test out whether things are safe before we get into the upswing of getting into the emotions of where we should be going towards. And then we get to the end point and we're all on the same page then going, whew, always said we could do it, but it's an absolute struggle. And while people are talking about flattening the coronavirus curve, I've been talking for many years about flattening the curve of change. So they want to flatten the peak in terms of numbers. I want to flatten our response to it. And these negative emotions, you know, think about it. If somebody sadly were to pass away or die, or you go through a divorce or some form of change, even other than business, although this applies very strongly to business as well, is that from the initial surprise, we go through anger, frustration, a little bit of fear, a little bit of denial, a little bit of disappointment. And we saw all of that when lockdown was announced, with people panic buying, and still, even today, being more frustrated about, will lockdown be continued? I mean, how am I going to cope with this? I'm bloody angry. They're taking away my civil rights. All of these natural human emotions that have dragged us so far away from where our mindset should be, that it's actually a strange phenomenon. From here to here, where you want to go, if you take a curve, if I drag that arrow into a straight line, I'd run out of steam, because it takes us 3 times as long as humans to respond to a change as it ought to, before we get through that accept or decline stage when your brain can't come up with anything worse. And then you start to see a little bit of light coming towards you, some trial, acceptance, commitment, belief, progress. And then boom, we're out there once again. So I work with companies trying to get them to flatten the curve. And what I've been working on in conjunction with a number of fellow colleagues, speakers, and conversational intelligence specialists around the world is a plan that can help you get through that. From, hey, there's this virus, and oh, we need to be back in business all over again. How do we still the fear? How do we engage people? How do we get them to reframe their own stories and connect more before they start to see that they can focus on what they should be doing, shaping their new story and getting out to it? Although I must tell you that the world will never be what it was before we went into lockdown. I think we're going to have some incredibly strange scenarios to look forward to. And I've got some documentation on that as well that I've spent the last 2 days preparing, knowing that we were going to have this conversation. And if we can give out my email address, or people want to get it from you at the end of this chat, I'm happy to share my top 20 guidelines for what's going to change internally and what's going to change externally. And it's the hardest thing in my life that I've ever written, Tess. It's a very strange thing. I've spent 2 days writing 1,500 words. Wow. And they had to be shaped and crafted. And I think I'm ready with them. But I know it's never going to be life as usual again. And, you know, I can be glib about it and smile about it, but the facts are things are going to change.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think we all need to accept that fact. I'm very interested about what you've mentioned, the psychological effect that all of this has on employees. So I believe we've had the first wave. People are feeling isolated, they're feeling panicked, missing that support and the human connection. You know, like I said yesterday, the future is as clear as mud, but looking at various possible scenarios, assuming this lockdown continues indefinitely, 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks, emotions will probably escalate, things will probably get worse. Now, some companies do provide some psychiatric support, some talk rooms where they can encourage their staff, try and beef up the morale a little bit. But what do the smaller companies do that doesn't have that kind of support system? Have you come across any of those who are kind of floating in cyberspace, not knowing what to do?
Yeah, I think the initial thought is that the curve itself is not just continuous. And what happens, depending on your support structure, you go back and forth upon it. It's not that you'll start at the beginning and get from A through to Z straight away. You can actually wallow in self-pity, you can wallow in denial, you can wallow in anger and frustration, and therefore your curve becomes even deeper before you get to the point where the sun should shine again. I mean, look, let me give you a great sage's quote, first of all. And I love this. And it's not that I'm fond of quoting other people, but this really stuck with me. And here's the quote. You'll find that many of the truths that you cling to depend greatly on your point of view. And that was said by that wise old sage, Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars. You'll find that the truths you cling to depend greatly on your point of view. And I think that, you know, in many respects, let's face it, remote working we've struggled through. And for people who really are thinking that they're in a crisis right now, it's very hard to onboard new technologies like Zoom meetings like this or remote working. And frankly, technology has let us down. But, you know, you've got to embrace it. You've got to get into it. You've got to keep a sense of humor with it. And I think that real engagement for those who are in employment has been missing in action because leaders have been sadly quiet through this. Although everyone looked to a leader like Ramaphosa in South Africa and went, phenomenal, great stuff. You made the right call, Cyril, great president. You know, but business leaders have been sadly missing in action. I would like everyone to go onto YouTube and look for the Nando's lockdown commercial. And it's not an advert. Calling it a commercial is wrong. It was actually Robbie Brosen, as the leader of Nando's, his videoed message to his Nandokas, the people who work inside Nando's. So just go and Google Nando's lockdown, and you'll find a piece of communication in there where he talks to his people and explains why Nando's has to turn off their flame temporarily for the moment. It's a hell of an inspirational piece. And if you ever needed a leader to show you a way forward other than our president, I'd check out Robbie Brosen because he's superb. You know, I think many of us are treating this lockdown, small employee people or small business people, we're treating lockdown as a punishment. You know, the United Nations actually came out on torture and said solitary confinement beyond 15 days is a cruel and inhuman punishment. But you know what? It was done for a positive security measure.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we have problems with it, but the world will bounce back. Now, you can wallow in self-pity and doubt, or you can engage more positively. Stop believing your next door neighbor who last week, what did they say on the one meme I saw? Last week she sold nail polish. Today she's an expert on coronavirus. How amazing is that? I think what you've got to do is you've got to follow some really sensible stuff. And you've got to find out that what is going to change, and what will change is pretty much everything. The way we've worked, the way we've lived is going to differ, and it's going to be very, very different from that which we've been through before. So if you're feeling isolated, if you're really struggling right now, remember that everyone else is in this together. The International Labour Organization said 81% of the global workforce is affected by this. That's 4 out of 5 people, and there are 3.3 billion people who've experienced a full or a partial workplace closure right now. So there are new things that we're going to need to consider. From the business that we're in the hospitality industry, I think that you're going to have to get into a new form of social distancing beyond lockdown in its own right. I think people will learn that we'll need to carry a health passport or a visa for cleanliness, for hotels, for restaurants, for conferences. There'll be more of this online communication and servicing. Rampant consumerism is going to slow down. But will the world stop? No, it won't. It'll continue in a new form, and we've got to make ourselves as much as we can aware of that new form and swing through that curve as quickly as we can, knowing that it's okay to have been depressed and angry and fearful, but you've got to start looking for the way out and getting to lead in a new style economy. It's going to be different, and it's going to be strange, and it's going to be uncomfortable. But, the clues are out there already if you read the good stuff. I mean, me, myself, for example, I started this by way of introduction. Thank you for letting me do so, by saying I'm a speaker on change. Now, I've gone out and formatted materials on change all of my working life as a self-employed person. I've just figured out, whilst writing the piece that I spent 2 days working on yesterday, that me predicting change is pretty useless unless I can stay with the cool things that are relevant and the stuff that really seems to work, and not believe my next door neighbor who used to sell whatever it was that she sold before she became a medical expert. I'm focusing now on delivering for my new conferences a company's message, helping them create their own, because I can communicate and speak and work. And before I used to get up and sell my message. Well, now I'm going to get out there and present yours. Everything changes. And everything in our world is going to be different. You need to lead. You need to get through this negativity as quickly as you can by following the right stuff. And don't read the whole internet, but look to reliable, regular sources and find yourself some stuff. Keep watching this program that you're putting out, Tess, and other industry experts. People will give you the clues and lay down the breadcrumbs. Follow the right breadcrumbs. Don't get led into a forest. Look for a sunshine. That's
a very interesting analogy. Thank you for that, Michael. You also just reminded me. We had a bit of a group happy hour, call it an industry happy hour on Monday, and I chatted to about 12 individuals in the industry, listening to these stories, and everybody's been infected or affected in a different way. Some of them have been just put on forced leave. Some have had salary cuts, and everybody's sort of in a different situation in the same way. And excuse me, certainly due to the same thing. Yet, one of the ladies, very interesting, she's actually in the entertainment business. So like many of us, our businesses hit a brick wall. So what now? And she happened to know somebody who's in food distribution, and she managed to get herself a vehicle, a license, allowing essential services. And now she's gone from entertainment into food distribution. That's just one example. So for many of us, we'll have to look at different ways of doing things and possibly going into a completely different industry. And I think during the chat, we agreed that collaboration and communication is essential. And I also found that chatting to everybody, albeit virtually, there's a sense of support when we do that. So we've decided we're going to do it once a week. And you know, apart from the support system, who knows what might come out of there? And I think we need to reinvent ourselves in many ways.
Yeah, and if you go into it, I think it's a very valuable point. I do think that business will continue, and I'm not suggesting that, you know, from me being a speaker at conferences that I'm going to go out there and become a truck driver into the future, because the world will continue. But let's look at it from the things that we actually secretly enjoyed. You know, whilst we've been in lockdown, think about these positive things. You haven't had to spend 3 hours a day in traffic.
Oh, yeah.
You've been able to slow down and look at the small stuff. There's been a newfound focus on you and what you and your business really are. You've reconnected with family in ways that you hadn't for so long. You've reconnected with associates, with peer groups, with stuff like this, and you've reevaluated your time and found better ways to manage it for yourselves. So it's proven to you that you can learn new things. I said to my wife this morning, even though I have no income coming in at all, I should have been in Chicago, Miami, all over the world in the last month, and my income has been pulled like a rug from completely underneath me. I've had some conferences that want to rebook for November. I've had others that have been postponed into 2021, and I've had some where they've said to me, gee, is there anything else that we could do? I'm going to start interviewing some speakers like this in 5-minute grabs and keep sending those messages out to audiences from 1 or 2 conferences that I've been working with. Marginal change at that level. And I told my clients I'll do it free because I know there'll be a bigger event coming up back again in November. But those things that we secretly enjoyed. I said to my wife this morning, I'm wondering whether lockdown will be continued. And if it is, I've got so much stuff that I need to finish, I'm okay with it. I don't yet know financially how the hell we're going to survive. But, you know, in South Africa, what's that wonderful phrase, a boer markup plan? There's always a bloody plan. The entire global economy cannot collapse. And forget everything negative that you've heard. Start focusing on you and your stuff. All of the things that I've just talked about that we've secretly enjoyed, we could have done before lockdown. We didn't, because we were too bloody busy rushing around trying to look and feel important and not focusing on the stuff that really is important. Does your business deserve a business? Does it deserve to be in business? Do you deserve to be in business? What set you apart? There are 150 million businesses registered on the planet's surface. 80% of the workers in those businesses right now are furloughed, have been laid off, have been shut down. We cannot close the world economy to a major extent. We're not living on a new planet, on a different planet. The world will continue, but your financial management's going to have to change. If you'd been more financially prudent, you wouldn't be in this bloody situation right now. Mega entities will evolve, I think, and get going. You know, just-in-time supply chains will be stretched and tested for resilience. And mark my words, I don't believe the economy will recover to the pre-corona levels till about 2025. But you've got to figure out, whilst this economy globally is recovering, how you deliver tangible, material, or focused benefit. What's your uniqueness? And use the next week of lockdown in this country, wherever you're watching this from, whatever period of lockdown time you've got, to focus on you, your value, and your people, and your abilities and your additional capabilities. Money's going to be tight. Executive bonuses in the corporate world will disappear. 13 checks will disappear. Pay increases will disappear as companies and industries struggle to rebuild. A 5-year rebuild at that level. Learn technology. Learn to communicate more. All of these things you could have done before the virus. And I'm not trying to depress anyone, because even though it's never going to be life as usual again, there will be life in a new form. And we must change, shape and create your story and get it out there when the time is right.
Wow. Michael, that's very encouraging and very positive. Thank you for that. And indeed, good advice that I hope we can get across to many people, not just in South Africa, but around the world.
And one last point in, Tess.
Yeah, yeah.
If there's one thing that you should be doing whilst you're considering your place in your business right now, it's lead through communication. And I genuinely believe right now that that has been the single biggest missing factor from companies chatting to employees, exciting their partners, attracting their customers, engaging their market spaces. Create a story that is yours, unique, concise, but comprehensive. And start developing that. And for goodness sake, start talking to people. Lockdown doesn't mean silence. It means you ought to be communicating strongly in different ways.
Fantastic, thank you. I just wanted to touch on the mention of family reconnection, and that is something that's come across very strongly in the people I've been chatting to this past week, especially in the hotel and hospitality industry, chatting to Graham Wood from Sun International earlier this week. One of the big things for him was being able to reconnect with his family, because being in our industry, we don't know weekends. We don't understand 9 to 5. We're hardly ever home. So it's actually been a blessing in a way to be forced to be with your family, with your loved ones, and kind of connect with your kids, and actually realize, sure, they've grown, and realize what they know.
Yes.
I think
Yes.
definitely some positives that's coming out of this. Michael, I think we are almost out of time. Before we sign off, any final words from you? Well, we may